So as we've talked about in previous videos, at the end of the day, it's really up to each one of us to start to decide and feel out what's the next best step for us. And to understand and start to claim empowerment for the choices that we make, for the thoughts that we have, for the actions that we take, and really how we start to put together the pieces to make up our own personal paradigm or worldview. Yet taking this concept much more deeply and looking at it in a bigger perspective, I think there's a few things that we need to understand. First is that we'll usually only see what we're ready to see. We usually only find what we're already trying to seek. And really on top of that, we usually can't be taught what we're not already trying to learn. So if that seems a little bit cagey or a little bit fuzzy, I'm going to give you a few examples and illustrations to take it a little bit deeper. So in other words, we can understand that if we don't already have the lock, then whatever key we're trying to bring in obviously isn't going to fit. And we might be seeking, we might find, somehow find ourselves a piece of the puzzle, but unless we're already trying to put that puzzle together and we already have some pieces, there's not going to be anywhere for that to fit. So that's a really important and crucial understanding that I think we need to really start to take a step back and to really let that digest and assimilate. So while we do that, let's take it a little bit further and explore it a little bit more deeply. So if we're a person who has a very narrow, rigid, or inflexible worldview that only sees things in black and white or either or, we have to understand that that has applications, that has a usefulness in certain areas of life, but usually across the board, that paradigm or that way of seeing the world tends to be very limiting, tends to be very inflexible, because life and reality usually exists on a spectrum, in a gradient, or a matrix, and not really in this little set of either or boxes. So if we can start to understand and see relationship, context, relevancy, appropriateness, unappropriateness, and see how things fit together and see how things might be appropriate in certain situations but not in others, things might be true in this sense but false in this sense and unknown in this sense, we can start to open ourselves up to a much broader way of seeing and understanding the world, and thus a much more flexible and adept way of sorting through and navigating reality, whether that be on the physical level or even the intellectual level. So that might mean if someone is putting out some information or someone is presenting, or maybe we're reading a book, we're watching a movie, we're reading a magazine, we're listening to a lecture, if that speaker is speaking in a certain way, which might be a little more holographic, might be a little more spectrum or probability or sort of gradient based, meaning it's a little bit of a bigger picture rather than just only do this at this time and this way at this time, this exact moment, this exact specification, then if that's what we're looking for, that's what we're seeking, then that's how we're going to try to make the information fit. Meaning if someone is taking something which is a little more holographic and all we have is this little box, there's obviously going to be some disconnect and there's going to be some discord, because basically we're trying to make something which doesn't fit into that hole. In other words, if we don't already have that lock, then the key is obviously not going to fit in. So to take that a little bit more deeply and to make it a little bit more tangible, like let's say we have a certain worldview or a certain perspective. Now, whatever situation we might go into, we might, and usually do, try to make that situation fit our pre-existing mental concepts. So if we're a type of person who just thinks the world is a terrible place and people are mean and everyone's not nice and everyone's out to get you, or even the government's out to get you all the time and there's this massive control program and you have to be afraid and on guard all the time, then no matter what information we see, no matter where we go, we're going to try to make the information fit that definition. Or we could be someone who's just really angry and bitter and who just needs situations to reveal that, so then every certain situation, that's what we're going to see, that's what we're going to notice, and that's typically what's going to happen. Not all the time, but very likely most of the time. Or even another example, for the type of person who starts to get this sort of Savior, Jesus, Messiah mentality where people are divided up into this group to where there's this very small people who get it, are in the know, and everyone else is just stupid and needs to be awakened or enlightened, then we're going to start to shift and make every situation fit that, meaning we're going to probably be that weird guy at the health food store that corners people like, did you hear about this? oh my god, did you watch this documentary? I watched it, and blah blah blah, and just started going on, and then otherwise, and people are just like, cool, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you later. And they're just like, oh, did you see that weird dude over there? He's talking about this and that. So that's definitely an archetype. Or on top of that, the person who just posts stuff on Facebook all day long about the same thing, just trying to spread the gospel or spread the good word. Meaning, it's this program where, oh, I know about this and everyone must know because they need to be enlightened. And again, if that's our program, if that's our self-image, then situations are going to basically mold and fit around that. On the flip side, on the flip token, basically, if we have a perspective or a self-image where, you know what, I'm okay, you're okay, or I'm a generally optimistic person, people are generally nice and generally cool and laid back and easy to deal with, then situations are typically going to fit that mold, and things are going to start to fall into that. And we can go on and on and on with different self-images and labels. Those are just a few, but basically it just gives you a bigger picture. First we started off with these sort of generalized concepts, and then took it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and in the end, with those different examples, you can start to see how if we have a certain self-image or a certain agenda or a certain idea about the world, it can basically distort everything that we're trying to do. So if we're seeking knowledge, we're seeking information, or we're trying to grow, or just living our lives, experiences will start to shape and shift and mold to whatever those pre-existing things are. So that's really why so many traditions talk about being present, emptying your mind, emptying your container, emptying your cup, being reborn, being like a child. The metaphors and the imagery just go on, and that's even a whole other video, which we'll get into that later, but that's really what that's starting to talk about. So hopefully that's been insightful and helpful, and started to take these more esoteric ideas that we've touched on and made it a little more grounded and practical. So if you have any questions or comments, post them below, and I'll talk to you soon.